The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with voices from 47 different species. Chairman Zexathari stood at the center podium, his blue skin glowing under the bright lights. His forearms moved as he spoke, making gestures that meant agreement in his culture. But today, his words brought no peace. "The humans have shown us their true nature," Zexathari said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "They are too violent, too unpredictable. We cannot trust them with the safety of our galaxy." Captain Jake Martinez watched the live broadcast from his ship high above Earth. The orbital station New Geneva was humanity's pride, a symbol of their place among the stars. Now it felt like a prison. Jake's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair as he listened to species after species vote to remove humanity from the Council. The Altarians voted yes. The Centaurians voted yes. Even the peaceful Vegans, who had been humanity's closest friends, raised their tentacles in agreement. Jake counted the votes in his head. 39 species wanted humans gone. Only 8 spoke for them. Dr. Lisa Chang sat in the diplomatic gallery, watching her life's work crumble before her eyes. She had spent 15 years building relationships with alien cultures. She spoke 12 alien languages and understood the customs of dozens of worlds. But none of that mattered now. The Altarian delegate who once called her sister friend would not even look at her. All human colonies must leave council space within 60 standard days, Zexathari continued. All trade agreements are canceled. All military partnerships are ended. This decision is final. Lisa felt her diplomatic immunity badge grow heavy in her pocket. Soon even that would be worthless. She thought about the thousands of humans living on alien worlds, the mixed families, the children who had never seen Earth. Where would they all go? Admiral Pete Collins received the order while inspecting the mining operation on Kepler 432b. The planet was rich in rare metals that Earth needed for its growing fleet. But now they had to abandon everything. Pete looked at the worried faces of the miners and their families. These people had built lives here. They had homes, friends, and dreams. "Sir, what do we tell them?" asked his aide, Lieutenant Amy Brooks. Pete sighed and looked out at the red sunset over the mining complex. "Tell them to pack everything they can carry. We leave in 50 days. The evacuation began immediately. Transport ships that usually carried cargo now filled with families and their belongings. The agricultural world of Eden Prime faced the hardest choice. The crops were almost ready for harvest, enough food to feed millions. But there was no time to wait. The council had made their deadline clear. Mayor Steve Johnson of New Dallas, the main city on Eden Prime, called an emergency meeting. The town hall was packed with farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and factory workers. All of them had the same question: why did this happen? "The council says we started a war with the Craxi Empire," Steve explained, reading from the official notice. "They say our attack on their supply lines was unprovoked aggression." Angry voices filled the room. The Craxi had been raiding human colonies for months. They had killed civilians and stolen children. When humanity finally fought back, it was called aggression. When the Craxi attacked first, it was called a minor dispute. "This is not fair," shouted Farmer Bill Turner. "We were protecting ourselves." Steve nodded, but fairness did not matter now. Only survival mattered. They had to leave before the council's peacekeepers came to force them out. Back on Earth, President Claire Bennett held an emergency cabinet meeting. The Situation Room deep under the White House felt smaller than usual. The weight of 7 billion humans pressed down on everyone present. "How many people do we need to relocate?" Bennett asked. Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez checked his tablet. "Approximately 12 million humans live in council space. Most are on colony worlds, but some work on alien planets or space stations. Can we fit them all in human space? It will be crowded, but yes. The real problem is the resources we are losing. The mining operations, the research stations, the trade routes. Our economy will take years to recover." Secretary of State Maria Santos leaned forward. "Madam President, we should consider our response carefully. The galaxy is watching how we handle this." Bennett understood. If humanity appeared weak, other species might think they could push humans around. If they appeared too angry, it would prove the Council was right to fear them. Meanwhile, something else watched from the darkness between galaxies. The Devourer fleet had been traveling for decades, following the subspace signals that all advanced civilizations used. They had heard the Council's broadcasts, learned their languages, and studied their weaknesses. The Devourers did not care about politics or justice. They only cared about consumption. Every living world was food to them. Every thinking species was just another resource to harvest. They had consumed entire galaxies before, leaving nothing but empty space and dead stars. Their ships were massive, dark things that seemed to eat light itself. The smallest Devourer vessel was larger than humanity's biggest dreadnought. The largest were the size of moons filled with billions of hungry creatures that lived only to feed. Captain Susan Blake commanded the Border Patrol ship UES Watchman at the edge of human space. Her sensors picked up strange readings from deep space, but they were so faint that her computers dismissed them as background radiation. The readings came in patterns like a vast fleet moving through the void. "Should we investigate, Captain?" asked her science officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper. Susan looked at the readings again. They were probably nothing, just echoes from distant stars. Her ship had more important work to do, helping with the refugee evacuation. "File a report with Fleet Command," she said. "But our priority is getting our people home safely." The last human transport left Council space exactly 59 days after the vote. Dr. Lisa Chang was on that ship, watching alien stars fade behind them. She had given her whole adult life to building bridges between species. Now those bridges were burning, but Lisa was not the type to give up. She knew that someday, somehow, humanity and the Council would need each other again. When that day came, she would be ready. The transport ship UES Hope carried 10,000 refugees toward Earth. In the cargo bay, families huddled together around their few possessions. Children asked their parents why they had to leave their homes. The adults had no good answers. Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of New Geneva as the last transport disappeared into hyperspace. The station felt empty now, like a ghost town in space. Most of the human crew was gone, reassigned to ships heading home. Only a skeleton crew remained to shut down the systems. "Orders, sir?" asked his first officer, Commander Lisa Park. Jake looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, the species that had rejected humanity were going about their normal lives. They thought they were safer without humans around. They thought they had solved their problems. They were wrong. 6 months had passed since humanity left Council space. The galaxy felt quieter without human voices in the diplomatic channels. Chairman Zexthari told himself this was peace, but deep down, something felt wrong. The silence was too complete, too perfect. The first sign of trouble came from the edge of the galaxy. Long-range sensors detected massive objects moving through dark space, but the readings made no sense. The objects were too big to be ships and too fast to be asteroids. Council scientists dismissed the data as equipment failures. Dr. Helen Ross worked at the Rigel Deep Space Observatory, the most advanced sensor array in Council space. She had been tracking the anomalies for weeks, and the pattern was becoming clear. Something was approaching the galaxy, something huge and moving with purpose. "Look at this," Helen said to her colleague, Dr. Yithal Kiran. She showed him the sensor data on her screen. "These objects are following the major hyperspace routes. They know where our worlds are." Yithal's 6 eyes studied the data carefully. His species, the Andorians, were known for their logical thinking. But this data defied logic. The objects are too large to be artificial. Perhaps they are some kind of space creature we have never seen before. Helen shook her head. "Space creatures do not move in formation. These things are organized, planned. I think they are ships." Before Yithal could respond, the emergency alarm sounded throughout the observatory. The main screen lit up with an incoming priority message from Altair Prime. "The capital world of the Altarian Republic. Emergency broadcast to all Council worlds," came the panicked voice of Admiral Techmore. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. Requesting immediate assistance from all available fleets." The transmission cut to static. Helen and Yithal stared at the screen in shock. Altair Prime was one of the most heavily defended worlds in the galaxy. Its orbital platforms could stop any known enemy. What could possibly threaten it? Admiral Techmore commanded the Altarian defense fleet from his flagship, the ANS Starlight. He was a veteran of 3 wars and had never lost a battle. But the enemy ships rising from hyperspace were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were massive, dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. Their hulls looked organic, like they had been grown rather than built. The smallest enemy ship was 3 times larger than his flagship. The largest was beyond measurement. "All ships, attack formation Delta," Techmore ordered. "Target the lead vessel and fire all weapons." The Altarian fleet opened fire with quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons. The energy beam struck the enemy ship and simply disappeared, absorbed into its black hull. The ship did not even slow down. "Sir, our weapons have no effect," reported his tactical officer. "The enemy is not returning fire." That was the most terrifying part. The dark ships moved through the Altarian fleet like they were not even there. They ignored the attacks completely. Their goal was not to fight but to reach the planet below. "All ships intercept course," Thekmor ordered. "Do not let them reach Altair Prime." But it was too late. The lead enemy vessel opened like a flower, revealing a mouth filled with mechanical teeth. Smaller ships poured out, swarming toward the planet like insects. Within minutes, the first cities went dark. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes. When it was over, not a single Altarian ship remained. Admiral Thekmor's final transmission was a warning to the rest of the galaxy. They do not want to conquer us. They want to consume us. All of us. News of the Altarian massacre spread through council space like wildfire. Species that had lived in peace for centuries suddenly faced an enemy that showed no mercy and no interest in negotiation. The attackers did not even try to communicate. They simply arrived, consumed, and moved on. Chairman Zexthari called an emergency session of the council. Only 38 species answered the call. 9 worlds had already gone silent, their signals lost in the darkness. The Great Hall felt empty and cold. "What do we know about this enemy?" Zexthari asked. Dr. Helen Ross presented her findings to the assembled delegates. Her hands shook as she operated the holographic display. "We call them the Devourers. They appear to be a nomadic species that travels between galaxies, consuming all life they encounter." The images she showed made several delegates leave their seats. Entire worlds stripped bare, their surfaces scarred and lifeless. Space stations reduced to twisted metal, the remains of once great civilizations floating in the void. "How do we fight them?" asked Admiral Corvin of the Centauri Federation. Helen's expression was grim. "I do not think we can. Every world they attack makes them stronger. They learn from our technology and adapt to our weapons. Each victory teaches them how to win the next battle faster." Fleet Commander Ythal of the Rigel Alliance stood up. His people were natural strategists, and he had spent days studying the attack patterns. "We need to hit them hard and fast before they can adapt. Coordinate all our fleets for one massive strike." "Against how many ships?" asked the Vegan representative. Helen checked her data. "Current estimates suggest at least 10,000 vessels, with more arriving daily. They seem to be using some form of faster-than-light travel we do not understand." The number sent a chill through the chamber. The entire council fleet, combining all member species, numbered less than 5,000 ships. They were outnumbered 2-1, and that ratio was getting worse every day. On Earth, General Ryan Murphy watched the reports from the Pentagon's Deep Space Monitoring Center. The humans had been cut off from council communications, but they still had long-range sensors. They could see the Devourer fleet spreading through the galaxy like a plague. "How long before they reach human space?" President Bennett asked during her daily briefing. General Murphy consulted his tactical computers. "At their current rate of advance, approximately 18 months. But that assumes they continue to move at the same speed. If they start adapting faster travel methods from conquered worlds, it could be much sooner." "What about the Council? Will they ask for our help?" Secretary of State Maria Santos shook her head. "Their pride runs too deep. They would rather die than admit they need the species they expelled." Bennett stared at the tactical display showing the Devourer advance. Red marks indicated fallen worlds, and there were too many of them. "How many people are we talking about?" "Conservative estimates suggest over 2 trillion sentient beings in the affected systems," General Murphy replied. "If the Devourers maintain their current rate of consumption, the entire council will be gone within 2 years. The president felt the weight of those numbers. 2 trillion lives snuffed out by an enemy that treated intelligent beings like food. It did not matter that those same beings had rejected humanity. They were still people with families, dreams, and hopes. Dr. Kevin Hayes worked in a secret research facility hidden in the asteroid belt. His job was to study alien technology, legally obtained through trade agreements. But now he was analyzing something much darker: debris from Devourer attacks collected by automated probes. The enemy ships were biological and mechanical at the same time, like living machines. Their hulls could repair themselves, and their weapons adapted to whatever they encountered. But Kevin noticed something interesting in the molecular structure. They need specific elements, he told his assistant, Dr. Amy Foster. Rare metals that are only found in the cores of inhabited worlds. That is why they target populated planets. Amy looked at the data, so they are not just killing for sport. They need something from us. Exactly. And that gives us a weakness to exploit. If we can deny them access to those elements, we can starve them. But Kevin knew that his discovery meant nothing if there was no one left to use it. The Council forces were falling back on all fronts. The Rigel system had gone dark 3 days ago. The industrial worlds of Tau Ceti were under attack. Captain Susan Blake commanded the border patrol ship UES Sentinel, monitoring the edge of human space. Her sensors were picking up refugee ships fleeing the Devourer advance. Most were Council vessels, damaged and desperate. "Captain, we are receiving a distress call from a Centauri transport," reported her communications officer. "They have 2,000 civilians aboard and their engines are failing." Susan knew the regulations. Council ships were not allowed in human space, but she also knew that those 2,000 civilians were not responsible for the political decisions of their leaders. Helm, intercept course. Medical, prepare for refugees. As the Sentinel moved to rescue the Centauri transport, Susan wondered how many other ships were out there, fleeing an enemy that could not be reasoned with or stopped. The galaxy was burning, and humanity could only watch from the sidelines. But watching was becoming harder every day. The enemy was getting closer, and soon human space would be next. When that day came, there would be nowhere left to run. The central command of the Galactic Council had become a fortress of fear. Once the massive space station orbited the peaceful world of Centaurus Prime, a symbol of unity among the stars. Now it was surrounded by the largest fleet in Council history, yet everyone knew it was not enough. Chairman Zexathari had not slept in days. His office walls displayed tactical maps showing the Devourer advance in real time. Red markers indicated fallen worlds, and they multiplied faster than his tired mind could process. Each red dot represented billions of lives lost to the hungry darkness. "Sir, we have lost contact with the Vegan Republic," reported Admiral Corvin, his voice barely above a whisper. "All 7 worlds in their system have gone dark." Zexathari closed his 4 eyes and tried to control his breathing. The Vegans had been among the most peaceful species in the galaxy. They had never hurt anyone, never even raised their voices in anger. Now they were gone, consumed by an enemy that cared nothing for peace or innocence. Commander Alex Turner sat in the observation deck of a civilian transport, watching the emergency session through hidden cameras. Alex was human, but his presence here was illegal. He had stayed behind when the other humans left, using false identity papers and surgical modifications to blend in with other humanoid species. The council chamber was half empty. 23 species had already fallen to the Devourers. The survivors huddled together like frightened children, their proud civilizations reduced to scattered refugees and desperate military units. "We need new tactics," declared Admiral Mordak of the Sirius Collective. His species was known for their strategic thinking, but even they seemed lost. "Everything we try fails. Our quantum shields are useless. Our plasma weapons feed their ships. They learn from every battle." General Yethel stood at the tactical display, pointing at the enemy advance with one of his 6 arms. "The Devourers follow our major hyperspace routes. If we destroy the nav beacons and seal the routes, we might slow them down and trap ourselves in isolated systems," Admiral Corvin replied. "Without hyperspace routes, we cannot coordinate our defense or evacuate civilians." Alex listened carefully, noting the desperation in their voices. These were the same beings who had called humanity too violent to join their peaceful civilization. Now they faced an enemy that made human wars look like children's games. Dr. Kevin Hayes worked frantically in his hidden laboratory, analyzing more Devourer debris. His assistant, Amy Foster, helped him process the data, both of them driven by the knowledge that time was running out. "Look at this," Kevin said, pointing to a molecular analysis on his screen. "The Devourers do not just consume biological matter. They need specific rare elements that are created only in the cores of living worlds." Amy studied the data. "Elements that are produced by geological processes influenced by life itself. They cannot just mine dead planets." "Exactly. That is why they target inhabited worlds. But more importantly, it means they have a weakness. They need to physically land on planets to extract these elements. They cannot just destroy everything from orbit." Kevin felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. But as he looked at the tactical displays showing the enemy advance, he realized that this knowledge was worthless if no one was left to use it. The Tau Ceti industrial complex fell on a Tuesday. 5 worlds that had produced ships and weapons for the Council fleet were stripped clean in less than a week. The massive orbital shipyards built over centuries were consumed like a snack. Captain Susan Blake watched the destruction from her position at the human border. Her ship, the UES Sentinel, had been rescuing refugee vessels for weeks. Her cargo bays were packed with survivors from a dozen different species. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Council fleet," reported her communications officer, Lieutenant Dan Cooper. "They are requesting permission to enter human space." Susan was not surprised. The Council forces were running out of places to retreat, but she also knew that her government's position was clear. The Council had made their choice when they expelled humanity. "Relay the message to Fleet Command," she ordered. "We follow orders, not politics." But privately, Susan wondered how long they could maintain that position. The enemy was getting stronger with each victory, and soon human space would be next. Meanwhile, in the deepest secure bunkers of Earth, President Bennett met with her top advisors. The Situation Room had been modified with new displays showing the galactic situation. The red zone of Devourer control covered nearly half the galaxy now. "Madam President, we are receiving diplomatic requests from 17 different Council species," reported Secretary of State Maria Santos. "They want to discuss mutual defense agreements." Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez leaned forward. "Some of our intelligence suggests that several Council members are privately discussing the unthinkable." "Which is?" Bennett asked. "Asking humanity for help." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. The same species that had called humans too dangerous for civilized society might soon come begging for human military assistance. General Ryan Murphy activated the holographic display, showing fleet positions across the galaxy. "Our tactical analysis suggests that conventional Council doctrine is completely inadequate against the Devourers. Their approach to warfare is too rigid, too predictable, and ours is not," asked the President. "Human military doctrine evolved through constant warfare. We adapt quickly, use unconventional tactics, and accept higher casualty rates in exchange for victory. The Council species have been at peace too long. They have forgotten how to really fight." Back at the Council's Central Command, the debate had been raging for hours. The chamber was thick with tension as delegates argued over their limited options. "We should contact the humans," said Admiral Techmore, the scarred survivor of the first Devourer attack. His words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock and anger. Ambassador Veltar of the Sirius Collective rose from his seat, his crystalline features flashing with outrage. "Contact the warmongers? The same species we expelled for their violence? Never. Pride will not save us," Techmore replied quietly. "The humans understand warfare in ways we never learned. They have been fighting each other for thousands of years, and that is exactly why we cannot trust them," Veltar shot back. "They will demand concessions, territory, political power. They will use our desperation against us." Chairman Zexthari listened to the arguments with growing frustration. Half of his people were already dead or missing. The enemy was advancing faster than they could retreat. Yet still the delegates argued about pride and politics. Dr. Helen Ross entered the chamber with her latest intelligence report. Her face was pale, and her hands trembled as she activated the holographic display. "The Devourer fleet has reached the inner Council worlds," she announced. "Current projections show that they will arrive at Centaurus Prime within 3 weeks. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Centaurus Prime was the political heart of the Council, home to 10 billion beings from dozens of species. If it fell, the Council would effectively cease to exist. "How many ships do they have now?" asked Admiral Corvin. Helen consulted her data pad. "Conservative estimates suggest over 50,000 vessels, with more arriving daily. Our remaining fleet strength is approximately 8,000 ships. The numbers were devastating. The Council was outnumbered 6-1, and the ratio was getting worse every day. Their enemies grew stronger with each victory while the Council grew weaker. There has to be something we can do," pleaded the Centauri representative. "Some weapon, some strategy we have not tried." Dr. Helen Ross shook her head sadly. "Every conventional tactic has failed. The Devourers adapt to our weapons within hours. They learn our fleet movements and counter them perfectly. We need something completely unexpected, something they have never encountered before. Admiral Thekmore spoke again, his voice cutting through the panic. The humans have something we do not have. Experience with impossible odds. They have faced extinction before and survived. By becoming monsters themselves, Veltar replied. Do we really want to invite that darkness into our civilization? What civilization? Thekmore asked. Look around you. Half our worlds are gone. The other half are dying. We can choose to preserve our dignity and die, or we can set aside our pride and live. The debate continued, but Alex Turner could see the tide turning. Fear was overcoming pride, survival instinct overwhelming political considerations. The question was no longer whether the Council would ask humanity for help, but when. As the session ended in deadlock, Alex prepared his secret report for human intelligence. The Council was breaking, their unity crumbling under the pressure of the Devourer advance. Soon, very soon, they would have no choice but to swallow their pride and ask for help. The only question was whether there would be anything left to save by the time they found the courage to ask. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Only 18 species remained to answer the call. The great chamber that once housed representatives from 47 civilizations now felt empty and cold. The missing delegates were not absent by choice. Their worlds had been consumed by the advancing Devourer fleet. Chairman Zexthari stood at the central podium, his forearms trembling slightly as he held the speaking rod. Dark circles under his eyes showed the weight of countless sleepless nights. Around him, the surviving delegates whispered among themselves in dozens of languages, but their words all carried the same meaning: fear. The situation has become critical, Zexthari began, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Our defensive lines have collapsed on all fronts. The enemy will reach our core worlds within days. Admiral Corvin activated the tactical display, and the holographic map that appeared drew gasps of horror from the assembled delegates. Red markers showing Devourer control covered 3/4 of the galaxy. The remaining blue zones representing Council space were small islands in a sea of destruction. Current fleet strength stands at 4,000 vessels, Corvin reported. Enemy forces are estimated at over 60,000 ships and growing daily. The numbers hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several delegates put their heads in their hands. Others stared at the display in disbelief. The Devourer fleet was now 15 times larger than what remained of the Council's military forces. Ambassador Elena Foster sat in the observer section, watching through hidden cameras as the civilization that had rejected her species faced extinction. Elena was officially persona non grata in Council space, but she had maintained unofficial contact with several sympathetic delegates. Her presence here was illegal, but these were desperate times. Dr. Lisa Chang, the former human ambassador, had sent Elena through back-channel communications that had taken weeks to arrange. The message was simple. If the Council ever decided to swallow their pride, humanity would listen. But they would have to ask. We need to consider all options, Admiral Thekmore said, rising from his seat. The scars on his face were reminders of his survival from the first Devourer attack, including options we previously rejected. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant, but no one wanted to say the words out loud. Admiral Mordak of the Sirius Collective stood up slowly. His species prided themselves on logical thinking, but logic was a luxury they could no longer afford. Are you suggesting we contact the humans? I am suggesting we contact anyone who might help us survive, Thekmore replied. Pride is meaningless if we are all dead. Ambassador Veltar leaped to his feet, his crystalline features flashing with anger. The humans are savages. They solve every problem with violence. If we invite them back, we become no better than the enemy we fight. At least we would be alive to debate the morality later. Thekmore shot back. The argument that followed was fierce but brief. Other pressing matters demanded attention. Dr. Helen Ross presented her latest intelligence on the Devourer advance, and the news was worse than anyone had feared. They have adapted new technologies from conquered worlds, Helen reported. Their ships are now 40% faster than our previous estimates. More importantly, they have learned to replicate our communication systems. They are listening to our tactical communications. Admiral Corvin cursed in his native language. So they know our battle plans before we implement them. Worse than that, Helen continued. They are using our own communication networks to coordinate their attacks. Every message we send helps them plan their next move. The implications were staggering. The Council's military doctrine relied heavily on coordination between fleet elements. Without secure communications, their remaining forces would be fighting blind. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Stephen Grant worked around the clock in his laboratory deep beneath the Pentagon. As humanity's leading expert on alien technology, he had been studying every piece of Devourer debris that automated probes could collect. The adaptive capability is incredible, he told General Ryan Murphy during their daily briefing. They do not just copy our technology, they improve it. Every ship they capture makes their entire fleet more effective. General Murphy studied the technical readouts with growing concern. What about our own technology? How would they adapt to human weapons? Dr. Grant hesitated. That is the terrifying part, sir. Our weapons are different enough from Council technology that the Devourers would need time to adapt. But once they do, they would become incredibly dangerous. How much time? Days, maybe hours. These creatures learn faster than anything we have ever encountered. The formal request for aid arrived through diplomatic channels that had been closed for over a year. Ambassador Kethris of Proxima delivered the message personally, using a small diplomatic courier that had to dodge Devourer patrol ships to reach human space. President Bennett received the encrypted message in the Oval Office, surrounded by her top advisors. The text was brief and formal, but the desperation behind the words was obvious. The Galactic Council formally requests military assistance from the United Earth government in repelling the Devourer invasion. She read aloud. All previous disagreements will be set aside in the interest of galactic survival. Defense Secretary Paul Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. They are asking us to save the people who threw us out of their club. Secretary of State Maria Santos shook her head. They are asking us to help prevent the extinction of trillions of innocent beings. This is bigger than politics. The debate that followed lasted through the night. Some advisors argued for negotiating favorable terms, demanding territory, resources, or political concessions in exchange for military aid. Others insisted that survival trumped politics. What do our military leaders think? President Bennett asked. General Murphy activated his tablet and displayed fleet readiness reports. Admiral Martinez believes our forces are ready for deployment, but he wants assurances that this is a joint operation, not just humans dying for ungrateful aliens. And our chances of success? Unknown, Madam President. We have never fought an enemy like this, but our tactical doctrine is fundamentally different from Council military theory. We might surprise them. President Bennett thought about the billions of human refugees who had been forced to abandon their homes in Council space. She thought about the children asking why they had to leave their friends behind. She thought about the species who had voted to expel humanity without giving them a chance to explain their actions. But she also thought about the 2 trillion beings facing extinction. Children of dozens of species who had never voted to expel anyone, families who just wanted to live in peace, artists, scientists, teachers, and dreamers who deserved a chance to continue existing. Draft our response, she ordered. We will provide military assistance under specific conditions. First, full integration of human and Council forces under joint command. Second, human tactical doctrine takes precedence in all operations. Third, after this crisis ends, humanity gets a permanent seat on the Council with full voting rights. And if they refuse? Asked Maria Santos. Then they face extinction alone. The response reached the Council within hours. Chairman Zexathari read it to the Emergency Assembly with mixed emotions. Relief that humanity had agreed to help, and fear at what the conditions meant. They want joint command? Admiral Veltar asked in disbelief. They want us to fight like humans? Admiral Thekmore stood up slowly. Do you want to survive this war? Of course. Then we fight like humans. The final vote was close, 10 species in favor, 8 opposed. But it was enough. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would place their military forces under partial human command. Admiral Jake Martinez received his orders while preparing the human fleet for deployment. The United Earth Defense Force would join what remained of the Council military in a desperate last stand against an enemy that had consumed half the galaxy. Captain Laura Davis, commanding the destroyer UES Defiance, watched the jump coordinates appear on her navigation display. After months of watching the galaxy burn from the sidelines, Humanity was finally going to war. But this would not be like any war they had fought before. The enemy was larger, more advanced, and more adaptable than anything humans had ever faced. Victory would require not just courage and skill, but something the Council species had forgotten in their long peace: the willingness to sacrifice everything for survival. As the human fleet prepared to jump into Council space, Admiral Martinez spoke to his captains over the fleet communication system. "We are about to fight alongside people who rejected us, to save civilizations that called us savages. But we do this not for them, but for the innocent beings who deserve a chance to live." The jump to hyperspace began, carrying humanity back to the stars they had been forced to abandon. This time they returned not as diplomats or traitors, but as warriors. The galaxy would learn what humans could do when survival was at stake. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Centaurus system, like a storm breaking through dark clouds. Admiral Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Liberty, watching as his ships took formation alongside the battered remnants of the Council fleet. The contrast was striking. The sleek, peaceful designs of Council vessels looked fragile next to the angular, armor-plated hulls of human warships. Where Council ships were built for exploration and diplomacy, human vessels were designed for one purpose: to survive in combat and destroy their enemies. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Council flagship," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "Put it through." Chairman Zexathari appeared on the main screen, his forearms trembling with relief and exhaustion. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed signs of recent battle, scorch marks on bulkheads and emergency lighting casting harsh shadows. "Admiral Martinez, thank you for coming. The enemy advanced scouts are already probing our outer defenses. We estimate the main Devourer fleet will arrive within 6 hours." Jake studied the tactical display showing enemy positions. Red dots swarmed around the system like angry insects, each one representing a ship larger than anything in the human fleet. "Chairman, we need to establish joint command immediately. My people will need access to all your tactical data and communication networks." "Of course, but surely you understand that Council military doctrine has been developed over centuries of successful—" "With respect, sir," Jake interrupted, "your doctrine has failed against this enemy. If you want our help, we do this our way." The silence on the comm channel stretched for several seconds. Finally, Zexathari nodded. "Admiral Thekmore will brief you on our current situation." The tactical briefing took place aboard the Council flagship ANS Unity. Admiral Thekmore, scarred veteran of the first Devourer attack, presented the grim reality to the assembled human and alien commanders. "Enemy strength is estimated at 65,000 vessels," Thekmore began. "Our combined forces total approximately 6,000 ships. The Devourers have learned to adapt to our weapons within minutes of first contact." Captain Laura Davis, commanding the destroyer UES Defiance, raised her hand. "What about their tactics? Do they have any patterns we can exploit?" Admiral Mordak of the Sirius Collective activated a holographic display showing previous battles. "They seem to prefer overwhelming force applied at specific points. They concentrate their largest ships to break through our defensive lines." Jake studied the battle recordings with interest. The Devourer approach was methodical and predictable, relying on superior numbers and adaptive technology. It was exactly the kind of enemy that human tactical doctrine was designed to counter. "They fight like they have all the time in the world," Jake observed. "No urgency, no improvisation. They just apply force until something breaks." "Is that not effective?" asked Admiral Corvin. "Against a conventional enemy, yes. But humans do not fight conventionally." Dr. Kevin Hayes had arrived with the human fleet, bringing his research on Devourer weaknesses. His discovery about their need for specific rare elements had been transmitted to all fleet commanders. "The key is disrupting their supply lines," Kevin explained to the Joint Command staff. "They need to land on inhabited worlds to extract the elements they require. If we can prevent that, we can starve them." Captain Susan Blake, now commanding the heavy cruiser UES Sentinel, studied the sensor data from her science officer. "What about their adaptation capability? How do we fight an enemy that learns from every attack?" Jake smiled grimly. "We give them something they cannot adapt to fast enough." The first phase of the human strategy began before the main Devourer fleet arrived. Instead of waiting for a traditional fleet engagement, human ships dispersed throughout. the system using stealth technology that Council forces had never seen before. Captain Dan Cooper commanded the stealth frigate UES Shadow as it approached a Devourer supply convoy. His ship was invisible to most sensors, a ghost moving through space with deadly purpose. Target the processing ships, Cooper ordered his weapons officer. Ignore the escorts. The attack came without warning. Human plasma torpedoes struck the massive Devourer vessels before they could raise their adaptive shields. The processing ships, designed to extract and refine rare elements from conquered worlds, erupted in brilliant explosions. Similar attacks occurred throughout the outer system. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck their targets, and vanished before the Devourers could respond. For the first time since the invasion began, the enemy advance slowed. But the real surprise came when Colonel Ben Williams led the first boarding action against a damaged Devourer vessel. His team of human Marines and Council Special Forces used equipment specifically designed to be non-adaptive. Remember, primitive weapons only, Williams told his team as they prepared to board. Chemical explosives, projectile weapons, anything the enemy has never encountered before. The boarding action was brutal and chaotic. The inside of the Devourer ship was a nightmare of organic machinery and mechanical biology. Creatures that were part machine, part animal defended their vessel with desperate fury. But human Marines had trained for this kind of close-quarters combat. They used shotguns loaded with simple metal pellets, grenades filled with basic chemical explosives, and flamethrowers that burned ancient hydrocarbons. The Devourer defenders could not adapt to weapons that were thousands of years old. Dr. Rachel Stone, working with Council scientists in a mobile laboratory, made the breakthrough discovery that changed everything. The captured Devourer technology revealed that the enemy was not just adaptive, they were networked. Every ship is connected to a central command vessel, Rachel explained to Admiral Martinez during an emergency briefing. Damage one ship significantly and the entire fleet feels it. But more importantly, destroy the command ship and the rest become confused and uncoordinated. Jake studied the tactical implications. So we need to identify and target their flagship. It is not that simple, Admiral Theckmore warned. The command ship will be the largest and most heavily defended vessel in their fleet. Approaching it would be suicide. Not if we use the right strategy, Jake replied. Council doctrine would never attempt such a mission. But humans specialize in impossible odds. The main Devourer fleet arrived with the force of an avalanche. Thousands of dark ships emerged from hyperspace, their hulls absorbing the light of nearby stars. The largest vessel was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and shielded by a cloud of smaller escorts. The joint fleet took defensive positions around Centaurus Prime, but Jake had no intention of fighting a traditional battle. As the Devourers advanced in their methodical formation, human ships began implementing tactics that no Council species had ever attempted. Captain Amy Foster commanded the assault carrier UES, valiant as it launched waves of small fighters directly into the enemy formation. The fighters were piloted by volunteers who knew they would not return, but their sacrifice would create the opening needed for the main attack. All fighters, target the escort screen, Foster ordered. Clear a path for the capital ships. The fighter attack was a scene of controlled chaos. Human pilots used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and desperate maneuvers that horrified the Council observers. But it worked. The disciplined Devourer formation began to break apart as ships moved to deal with the unexpected assault. Admiral Martinez seized the moment. All ships attack formation Omega. Target the command vessel. The UES Liberty led the charge directly toward the massive Devourer flagship, followed by every capital ship in the human fleet. Council vessels provided covering fire, their commanders finally understanding the human approach to warfare. The battle became legend. Human ships that should have been destroyed by enemy fire somehow survived through luck, skill, and sheer determination. The UES Defiance lost its engines but continued fighting with attitude thrusters. The heavy cruiser UES Titan had its hull breached in 3 places, but kept firing until its ammunition was exhausted. But it was Admiral Martinez who made the final sacrifice. With the Liberty shields failing and hull compromised, he ordered his crew to abandon ship. Then, alone on the bridge of his flagship, he set course for the Devourer command vessel. "This is Admiral Martinez to all ships," he transmitted on all frequencies. "It has been an honor serving with all of you. Tell Earth that we did our duty." The Liberty struck the massive Devourer ship at maximum velocity, both vessels disappearing in a blast of light that could be seen from the planet below. The explosion tore a hole in space itself, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. With their network severed, the remaining Devourer ships became confused and uncoordinated. They began firing on each other, their adaptive systems unable to cope with the sudden loss of central command. The joint fleet systematically destroyed them over the following hours. The cleanup took 3 weeks. Scattered Devourer forces throughout the galaxy found themselves cut off from their network, making them vulnerable to conventional attacks. Council and human forces worked together to hunt down the remaining ships. The memorial, service for Admiral Martinez and the 30,000 humans who died in the campaign, was held on Earth. Representatives from every surviving Council species attended,